I think, again, our mind plays such crazy tricks on us. And for me, always found a way to rationalize it. And oftentimes that was in the way of surrounding myself with heavy, heavy drinkers, alcoholic drinkers, even. And therefore, I justified my own drinking through the collective we, like it's not a big deal.
Well, yeah, you attract what you are, of course.
Right.
Today, I am here with Ben Tuff. Ben grew up splitting his time between Atlanta, Georgia, and Jamestown, Rhode Island. He attended Colby College, where he met his now wife, Gretchen, and treasured his times working as a sailing instructor and boat captain in the British Virgin Islands. Between Jamestown and the British Virgin Islands, Ben developed a lifelong appreciation for the ocean. Ben is a lifelong educator and has had the privilege of working with hundreds of boarding students from across the world. In 2012, Ben made the life-altering decision to break free of the hold that addiction to alcohol had on him. Despite not knowing how to swim, the sport of triathlon arrived quickly in his life. Then he moved to marathon swimming. His most recent swim was 24 miles from Providence, Rhode Island to Jamestown, Rhode Island. Esteemed producer Matt Corliss chronicled Ben's journey to sobriety and the parallels of his recent swim. The film Swim Tough: How I Swam My Way Out of the Bottle is projected to release this spring 2023, so shortly. Ben, welcome to the show. I'm grateful to have you here.
No, thank you for having me. That's the first time I've had my bio read out loud, and I was like, wow, it sounds good. Yeah, that's me.
You're like, okay, yeah, I did all that. Yeah, well, kudos to you. And sitting back and listening to that is probably a really, really just awesome feeling. And what's even better is that now you are sharing your story with the world in hopes of helping another person. And that's the goal of this podcast, I Love Being Sober, is we're here to help as many people as we can. And if we can share a few nuggets that are going to help somebody find recovery or help them guide their loved one to recovery or whatever, that's what it's all about. That's why we're here.
Exactly. As I tell people when I meet them and when I start talking to groups of students, I'm the happiest alcoholic that I know, because I'm so grateful for everything that it's allowed me to do in the past, present, and hopefully in the future too.
Yeah, I'm with you. It's like I learned how to live. I learned how to live the principles in all my affairs, which leads me to happiness and joy, because that's really what we all want. I went to this event the last weekend, and it was like a personal development event. And, the question is, what do you want? And we all wrote down all the things. I wrote down what I wanted. Like, what do I want? I want a healthy and loving relationship with my ideal woman. I want kids. I want, a nice house. I want 150 free days per year. I want a thriving business. I want to make enough money to do all the things that I want to do. And really, when it comes down to it, what do I want? The reason why I want all these things is because I think that these things are going to bring me to happiness and joy. Like, that's it. That is it. And then the next question was, it's not what do you want? It's like, what you want is what you have. Like, why don't you have it? Well, you don't have it because you don't really want it. And really, my life is dependent upon my choices. And so if I want certain things in my life, then it's like, what do I want? And then my choices should support what I want. And the emptiness and the guilt and the shame, when someone continues to go back to the bottle or the drink or the drug or the relationship that doesn't work or whatever, those are the choices.
Right. And I'm always thinking about this, whether it's a person who is thinking about sobriety or just thinking about changes in their life. And our life is full of so many choices. And for me, the one choice to give up alcohol, which had such a huge grip on my life and everything I did, that was a huge divergent path for me, and has allowed me now 11 years later to find so much success, not monetary success yet, but success in my life, success in my relationships, and success in helping others.
Is that the most important decision you've ever made in your life?
I would say yes. I actually can't think of anything that even comes close to
I
that.
was gonna say, what's the second most important decision that you've made in your life?
I would say the second one was deciding to learn to swim and finding an outlet, a healthy outlet in my life because but that was contingent upon the giving up of alcohol for sure.
Okay, and we're gonna get there. We're gonna get there. We're gonna talk about that. And interesting, you got into triathlon. I got into triathlon as well. 2000, I got sober 2011, 2016. I decided I wanted to do Ironman. And when you do Ironman, when you do triathlons, you have to swim. I couldn't swim. I couldn't swim. I remember the first time I went to the pool was Phoenix Country Day School, and there's a 5:45 a.m. class in January. It's really cold in Phoenix at that time. And I have a picture of it. There's steam coming off of the water. And there was one of the coaches, his name was Taco, an Asian guy. He was an Asian guy named Taco. You think he'd be Spanish, but he's not Spanish. He's or Mexican. He's not. He's Asian. And he brought me to the lane all the way at the very end. And he said, okay, I want you to swim. It's a 25-yard pool. He said, I want you to swim from this side, swim there and then swim back and then rest for 90 seconds. And then I swam there, I swam back, and I was just like, it was not good. And he said, okay. And now I just want you to swim from here to there and then rest for 2 minutes and then swim back. So that was my first day swimming, but I can only imagine what it was like for you. So let's kind of dig into it because I don't want to veer off into any rabbit holes. I've got a little. So tell me about your upbringing and when did you realize that you were an alcoholic?
So I was the youngest of 6 kids. We moved around a lot. My dad was a turnaround CEO, and we were brought up in a great family, a great household, and a life of privilege, especially once I got into middle school. And it was also for me a very stressful time. I have an identical twin brother. And when you have an identical twin or even a twin, your struggles with who you are and what you are, it's made that much more difficult because you have someone who looks exactly like you and who's often mistaken for you. And so it was hard for me to find my way. And I also had extreme anxiety. And this started I remember, grade 2. I had a good friend who had bladder cancer and had to have his bladder removed, and they didn't think he was going to make it. And he ended up going into remission, and that kind of set off something in my head. Like, what if I get it? Like, what if I die? This idea of mortality and who am I and how would I escape that? And I would channel all my anxieties into a malady of some sort from the second grade all the way through college and after college. And it was when I was 13 years old and I was having a panic attack, and I woke up my mom and I said, Mom, I'm like having a heart attack. I don't know what's wrong. I don't know what to do. And she went into the other room, came into the kitchen and brought out some vodka and gave me a shot of vodka.
Wow.
To cool my nerves.
Uh-huh.
And that's what she was brought up to do. And
Yeah.
I'm not faulting her necessarily, but from the early days of my life, I always made alcohol a escape and a solution to whatever problems I had. And at the same time, because I was the youngest of 6 kids, they would come home from college, they would come home after college, and they would party hard. And we as a family would party hard. So I would always think of it as having a good time. And starting at age 16, 17, I started to drink and binge drink and go out on the weekends. And the weekend was not the same unless I knew where I was going. I knew where I was going to get my booze, and I had a group of friends to do it with. And that was every weekend from my junior year all the way through. And obviously that carried through college. And I did have the opportunity to live down in the British Virgin Islands, and that was drinking to excess to a whole nother level. And I remember at one point the handles of Mount Gay rum, were actually cheaper than the 2-liter bottles of Coke. And so we were like, that was every night. And when you work in the tourism trade, you end up going out for a week straight with all the people who are coming in to the resort. And then a new group of people come in and you do the same thing with them. And it's this cycle that you kind of get caught up in. And, for me, when I drank, I didn't have that anxiety anymore. I didn't have the ups and downs of who I was as a person until the next day. And then I'd start drinking again or finding an excuse to drink again.
Did
And
it now, so the alcohol curbed the anxiety. The next morning, would the anxiety come back worse?
it would, but again, you know, I would always find an excuse, especially from college on, to either escape through some other means like going to the library or going on a drive until I could drink again. And it was socially acceptable. And when you go to
Uh-huh.
a school in the
Yeah,
middle of Maine and it's dark at like 2:45 every day, it's kind of easy to
yeah.
start drinking early with your buddies.
Right, right. Were any of your other siblings or your parents alcoholic?
They yes, yeah, and, I didn't know that at the time, but I have since I was the first in my family of 8 to get sober and have since helped 1, 2, 3 others in my family.
Ah, okay. What about your twin brother?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, so he got sober about 5 years after me. He called me up and he was like, "Oh, like, I'm having all these anxiety attacks, like, I'm having a bloody nose, I'm down in the Turks and Caicos, like, what do I do?" I was like, "Don't worry about it. I booked you a flight up. I'll get you into rehab tomorrow. I'll meet you at the JFK airport. I'll take care of you. You got this. Like, this is
Yeah,
gonna be great." He was
yeah.
like, "Are you sure I need that? Are you sure?" I was like, "I promise you, this is what you need right now, buddy."
Yeah. And how long did you know that he needed help or that he was an alcoholic or that he would soon be joining you?
Well, I'm not one to say, especially to someone, I'm not a judger, right? I'm not going to tell them like you have a problem. But if you look at the statistics of identical twins who have alcoholism, it's like 99% chance that the
Oh,
other one does too.
okay. I didn't know that. Okay.
And I knew it was going in the wrong direction for
Right.
him. And I always told them, like, if you ever, I'm not going to judge, I'm not going to tell you how to live your life, but if you ever need help, I'm here to help, and I'll drop whatever I have to do and help you out. And that's exactly what happened.
Yeah. Well, just like you just said, I mean, it's a self-diagnosed disease. And I remember, especially my first couple years, I was like, "Oh, he's an alcoholic. She's an alcoholic. Like he needs to get sober." But it doesn't work. Like it's self-diagnosed. People have to realize and until they realize and until they're ready, until they want help, there's really nothing there's nothing we can do. There's nothing you can do. There's nothing I can do. It has to come from that. They have to have the realization on their own.
Right. And for me, the funny thing is that I didn't know how to ask for help. And I was so ashamed I didn't know. And came to the point where I found myself having a panic attack in the ER. And my wife took me to the emergency room. And I'd stopped drinking the night before, and it was 11:30 in the morning the next day. And I asked the nurse why I hadn't been admitted to the hospital. And she said, "Well, your blood alcohol content is too high for us to admit you right now."
Oh, wow. Okay.
And so I kind of looked over at my wife and I was like, it's all up. Like this lie I've been leading of sneaking this alcohol, of sneaking, which had quickly over time switched from beer to vodka and beer. It was all up. And I kind of said, I'm going to rehab. Let's go. I'm going. I'm going right now. Like I'm ready to go. I'm done.
When did you know? At what point did you know that you were an alcoholic?
I think again, our mind plays such crazy tricks on us. And for me, always found a way to rationalize it. And oftentimes that was in the way of surrounding myself with heavy, heavy drinkers,
Mhm.
alcoholic drinkers, even. And therefore, I justified my own drinking through the collective we, like it's not a big deal.
Well, yeah, you attract what you are, of course.
Right. So it wasn't until about 12 years ago, it was about a year before I actually got sober. I remember I went to the liquor store and I went and I got my pint of vodka and I had my 2 vitamin waters. I sipped them down to the label. I filled up both the vitamin waters. I threw out the bottle, and I put them in my backpack. And I remember looking into the rear view mirror and being like, "You've got a serious problem." But then I said, "Oh, forget about it. Let's go back and drink this and
Yeah.
go on."
Yeah. And how long was that before you actually decide, or what? Tell me what happened. How long was that before you actually got sober? And then what happened?
Yeah, so that was about, I would say, a few months before, that last year was just so fuzzy for me. And I remember doing the dry January and then coming back just as hard as I started, thinking, if I can take a month off of drinking, I'd be convincing myself that I didn't have a problem, or I didn't need help, or I didn't need to stop drinking, because no alcoholic can take a month off and then be, and be okay. So it was just after that in, February and March, we went away on a spring break trip down to Florida with the family. And, I was just not in good form the whole time. And again, I made these excuses to justify my heavy drinking, in that I would tell myself, "Oh yeah, you're fine. Like, you're on vacation, you're having beers on the beach just like everyone else, like listening to music, hanging out. Like, that's part of being on vacation."
Mm.
And then I'd also justify it saying, "You're totally stressed out. You need a drink. You need a beer. You need some vodka." But it wasn't until April and the few weeks leading up to that, I remember my friend Doug came over, and I was just curled up on the couch crying. And I was like, "There's something wrong with me. There's something wrong with me." And I was just in the depths of depression, and the alcohol just made it even greater.
Mhm.
And once I made that decision to go to rehab, it was so freeing, in that two things happened. I gave up alcohol, and I was diagnosed with bipolar disorder, something that I'd been suffering from, or suffering with, my whole life. And it made, like, as I talked to my doctor, I was like, "Rocky, like, is this a normal thing?" He was like, "I can't believe it's taking you so long to go to a doctor." And I said, "Well, I've been afraid of doctors my whole life. Like, why would I go out of my way to seek one out?"
Right.
It's just such a counterintuitive thing for me.
And so when did you, I guess, why did you decide to start sharing your story publicly?
Oh, that's a really good question, because I actually got in trouble when I got out of rehab, because I was telling the students the truth. I said, it's hard when you have a school and you have a teacher, and you're protecting privacy, but at the same time, you don't want to give up too much information. But in my mind, I wanted the kids to know, because this is a human thing. And this is something that I struggled with. And a lot of those kids looked up to me. And so if I could help a couple of them, then it would be great. And so I had a student come up to me and say, "My mom has a really big problem. Can you help us?" And so I helped her get into rehab and get the help that they needed. And then I also started taking him and his sister to Alateen meetings. And then it was sort of just out there. And it's not like I walked around telling everyone, like, I'm a proud alcoholic, that's who I am. But when it did come up, I talk very openly and freely about it. And I would say it was probably 3 or 4 years ago that I really started to become more in my, I guess, setting out the goals of educating these kids as to what addiction really can look like, and how they can help themselves or others when they come across it.
What do you get out of sharing your story publicly?
Oh, that's a tough one. So I know that people make the same mistakes that I did. And my hope is that when I tell people my story, they can see those similarities, and they don't necessarily have to go that far down the road to make the healthy decision in their life to get help, or perhaps provide the help necessary for someone else. I do not prescribe to the idea that you have to hit your rock bottom in order to get healthy.
Mhm.
I think that for some of us, that's true. But for others, if you can recognize the warning signs and if you can understand who you are and your trajectory, you can start to make those decisions proactively in the beginning.
Right. And you can bring the bottom up also.
Mhm. Right.
And by bringing the bottom up, meaning, and that kind of has to do with the people that are around you, your loved ones, your support, your family, your parents, your friends. It's like, don't enable them. And it's like, if you draw some boundaries, like, hey, you can't live at my house if you're going to be drinking and doing drugs, then you got to follow through with it. Because if they're drinking and doing drugs, they're homeless because they don't have a place to live. But if they're drinking and doing drugs and you still let them live with you, then they're not at their bottom yet,
Right.
because
Totally,
they still
totally
have a
true.
place to live. And then so like slowly, if liberties get taken away slowly, it's much easier for a person to go deeper into their addiction, in my experience.
Right. And I would say for me, when, my wife said to me as soon as that shock wore off,
Mhm.
if you drink again, you are going to lose me and your kids.
Mm.
Done. It was drawn firmly in the sand. And then I think I stuck my hand up and said, I'll go, I'll do whatever it takes.
Yeah,
Send
yeah.
me to rehab. And I even remember it was so hazy, but I remember trying to plead with her saying, wait, does that mean I can't like have one beer every now and then? And it was just like shut off immediately.
Well, and that's great, because just think about it. If she said, well, let's just, let's just see how it goes. I mean, if she didn't draw that hard boundary, then possibly you would have, next thing you know, in a week, 2 weeks, a month, like next thing you know, you're drinking again. You're back
Right.
at it. And so you
Right.
don't lose everything, as opposed to just like, boom, you're done. Otherwise, I'm leaving you. And that was similar to how I ended up getting sober too. Is my then wife, now ex-wife, said, I'm leaving you. And the only way I will consider taking you back is if you never drink again, go to rehab and stop playing golf. It's like, I didn't understand the golf thing, but whatever. So, okay. So actually, you were talking about sharing your story publicly.
Mhm.
And, my experience is it's like there's 4 levels of learning, right? The first level is you read it, you write it down. All right. You listen, you read. Level 2, you write it down. Level 3, you speak it back. Level 4 is you teach it. So it's almost like I view that like sobriety. And when you're teaching and when you're sharing your story, really that's level 4 learning. And you're solidifying your foundation in sobriety, in recovery. You're an example. And so I know for me, I own a treatment center. I help thousands of people. I have a huge team. I have lots of people that look up to me and lots of people that respect. And so if I were to fall off the boat, so to speak, that's the example. Then everybody else thinks it's okay to fall off the boat. And if I act out, if my behavior, if I'm not living the principles in all my affairs, then I've got all these people that are watching me, and they see that it's okay to not live the principles in all your affairs, which is just a step closer to a relapse. So I don't know. Can you speak to that? What's your feeling on the level of accountability created by sharing your story?
Yeah. I've taken it to a whole nother level because I actually share my story in a movie, right? A
Great. Yeah,
movie that could very well be distributed around the world to thousands and thousands of people. So I don't get that satisfaction of sharing my story every single time in front of each person that watches that movie. But what I do get is I just got back from Georgia and I got to speak to 2 sets of parents, some University of Georgia students, some students in South Georgia from high school, some middle school students. And by my expressing my story and telling them about who I am, it allows me to still recognize my faults too. Like,
Mhm.
I am not a perfect human being, and I am not a perfect person in recovery. And each time I tell that story, that was it was me who made those decisions.
Mhm.
And my priorities were very, very different at that point. But by telling that story, it allows me to go back, recount what I did, and learn from it. And it's, I think that when I tell my story, something else new comes up. Like
Yeah.
with my wife just now, I just remembered her and me pleading for that final, just having a couple beers now and then. Like that
Mhm.
just came back to me.
Yeah.
And it's so important that we stay accountable. And now I've quit my job as a teacher and, well, as a formal teacher. Now I'm teaching students about who I am, about sobriety, and about how to stay healthy. And it all pivots around the center of me staying sober, being sober,
Mhm.
and practicing all these things in my daily life.
Exactly. So, why has swimming become so important to you?
So it was sort of by chance. My first sponsor, Ken, in rehab, it was like and he was from Ireland. He was a big triathlete, and I asked him if I could learn how to swim and if he would be my sponsor. And he was like, "Yeah, yeah, yeah. I'll be your sponsor. Like the swimming part, that's up to you. You got to figure that out and just put the time in, and you'll get there. Like I'm confident you're an athletic guy. You'll get there." So
Mhm.
right after I left rehab, I jumped in the pool and I was so stubborn. And I don't know whether it's just a generalization about alcoholics, but for this alcoholic, I am super stubborn and I would not take a lesson. I refused to have any help. I wanted to do it on my own. And I'm sure things would have moved a lot quicker if I had gotten a lesson, but I didn't. And, over time, over a 3-month period, I was finally able to swim a half mile and was able to do my first sprint triathlon. And that was all great. And I did well. And I did triathlons for the next 6 years or so and competitively and very competitively, in that I got to the point where all I wanted to do was win.
Yeah.
The only thing that mattered was winning and being the best. And I reminded myself out there one day in my final season of racing, I'm like, this isn't why you chose to do this. You chose to do this to be a healthy outlet. And instead, it's now become an unhealthy kind of obsession.
Mhm.
And I'd also learned about myself that when I spend time in the water, it was a time for me to just disappear, and I could be mindful. I can connect with my higher power. I can just work on whatever it was that I decided to work on that day. And it allowed for such fluidity that I embraced it.
Mm.
And so it was at that point that I said, okay, like maybe the swimming route is a way to go. And maybe it's not swimming against others. Maybe it's just against yourself and setting crazy goals. So that's what I did.
Yeah. I don't know about you, but I love endurance sports, and I'm no I did triathlon for 3 years, and then after I did my second Ironman, I was like, all right, I'm done. I still cycle. I still run. I did a few half marathons this year. I'm not really interested in doing I'm not interested in doing Ironman again. Although I've done rim to rim to rim, the Grand Canyon, which is 52 miles and 11,000 feet of ascent. I've done that a couple of times. I'm going to do it again this October. So that's great, but you're not racing. We aren't racing. We're just like going along for the ride. But my point is that I love the flow state that I get to when I'm on a long bike, when I'm on a bike ride, when I'm on a run, I'm not like swimming is I haven't jumped back in the pool in a while, but I would get the same thing from swimming too, because you're just in there. And when I'm cycling and when I'm running, I'm not on the phone, I'm not connected to my phone, and I'm not getting any text notifications. I'm not doing any of that. I'm fully present. I'm with myself, I'm with my thoughts. And I don't know about you, but I get my best ideas typically at the end. Like I go on a 4 hour bike ride, and it's like the last 10 minutes. I get the downloads of these amazing ideas that I implement, and they're just like hugely successful in business or something like that.
Right, right. There's this point that I reach Not with running because it's so jarring for me because I'm such a horrible runner. With biking to a certain extent, but I'm always wary of the cars around me and I get worried about getting hit.
Okay.
But when I swim, I could have hours disappear. It is crazy. Just
Okay.
like I just and yeah, I'm feeding every like half hour to every 45 minutes on long swims. But even then, it's just a flow for me.
Yeah.
And it allows my brain to get the rest that it needs because I spend so much time in my head thinking
Mhm.
about crazy stuff all over the place. But when I get in the water, it just seems to disappear and I focus on the important things. And I process the difficult questions in my life and I come to solutions or what I think are solutions in
Mhm.
my head to those big problems.
I mean, my experience is like our subconscious mind is 95% of our thoughts, right? Our conscious mind is only 5%. So most of our thinking, we have, I think it's 50 to 60,000 thoughts every single day. 90% of them or 95% of them are subconscious. And so it's like, even though I'm consciously trying to think about something or work on something, really it's just subconsciously. And I think that whether you're doing a long swim or along for me a long bike ride or a long so the other thing too is that if I'm having to work, I need to use my conscious thoughts. So for example, running, if I'm not in good running shape, because it'll take me a little while before I can get to a flow state when I'm running.
Mhm.
And if I can only run 3 miles, then I'm never going to get to the flow state. And it's kind of the same thing with cycling. It's much easier for me. Swimming, you have to be able to be comfortable, like just subconscious, you're just swimming, like automatically you're just swimming, which is where you're at.
Right. Yeah, I think when you spend so much time doing one thing, it does become just so natural. You know,
Mhm.
when I did my swim from Providence to Jamestown, I had a group of scientists from the Corey Stringer Institute, which is a athletic training institute out of University of Connecticut, and they counted my strokes every minute. So they were counting me from the beginning to the end.
Uh-huh.
And my stroke rate was between 49 and 51 from the second I got in the water to the second I got out over that
Wow.
15 hours.
Wow. Okay.
So, you
Okay.
know, that's not by chance. It's just because that's what I've conditioned my body to do.
Yeah. Yeah.
And, you know, one stroke after another.
Mhm. Now, you said you eat when you swim on your long swims. What do you like? How do you eat? Do you have to stop? Do you like, what do you do?
Yeah, I'll just stop and I'll for the first 4 hours, I tend to take Martin like a lot of runners do. Doesn't bother my stomach. It's like a gel and dissolve into water and it has high carbs. And then after that, I switch to all solids. So anything from watermelon to berries to I probably had 6 or 7 peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, you
So
know.
do you have a boat?
So I have a boat and I have a paddleboarder right next to me who paddleboards the whole time with me and will go and get the food and hand it
Uh,
to me.
okay. Is it always like that when people do long swims?
Yes. Yes. So they usually do it not with a paddleboarder, but they'll have like a long stick
Mhm.
with whatever the food it is and they'll dangle it out. They'll grab it and then they'll toss it back.
Okay, interesting. Okay, how long does it take for you to get to a flow state? Like when you're swimming, how long does it take before you're in that zone? Is it right away for you, or is it like 30 minutes? Is it 15 minutes?
Well, I'm also a little bit of an exception in that I listen to music when I swim. And
Okay.
so the purists out there are like, "Oh, you listen to music? How do you listen to music?" But that's how I roll, and I was the same way as a runner. I always had to listen to music,
Uh-huh.
and I only listen to reggae music, and you
So
know that started.
with words.
Yep, exactly.
Okay.
And so I pretty much from the second I get in the water, done. I am
Okay.
zoned in. That's it.
What kind of reggae music do you listen to? Like, who do you like?
Oh, everything. Peter Tosh, Toots and the Maytals, Steel Pulse, and then some of like the more California and reggae as well, like Revolution and Slightly Stupid and
Okay.
and
Yeah.
all those
Okay.
bands as well. So,
Okay.
whatever ends up, I have a 42-hour playlist on my Delphin that I listen to the music on. So I never know what's going to come up each time.
Cool. That's awesome. What were your biggest struggles in sobriety, in early sobriety?
Social struggles. It was really difficult for me to accept the fact that a lot of my friends were friends out of convenience. And kind of what we talked about earlier, we surround ourselves with like minded and like acting humans. And a lot of my friendships were based on drinking.
Mhm.
And those weren't friendships anymore because they couldn't hang out with me and I didn't want to hang out with them. So it was learning to accept the fact that it's the quality of your friendships over the quantity of your friendships. And I still have I struggle with that today. Living in Vermont, somewhere new, I don't have as many friends as I used to, and that's okay. That's I'm learning to accept that. And at some points I also have to remind myself, like, okay, when was the last time you made an effort here? Come on, Ben. Like, when was the last time you had someone over for dinner? Okay,
Right.
exactly. Like, we have to keep ourselves real and check ourselves.
Right. 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 Is there a question that you have always wanted to be asked, but the interviewer never got around to it?
Oh, where do I see my life and the direction of my life going probably at this point?
Okay. At this point, where do you see your life going?
And I started as just a pure educator, and now I have found a passion in helping others who are struggling with addiction or helping others who have loved ones who are struggling with addiction. And it's my goal to help them either through my talks, my movie, or actually helping them get to where they need to go.
Awesome. You want to tell me a little bit about your movie, a little bit about your book, or share with the audience?
Yeah, so my movie will be coming out in about 2 weeks' time. I'm very excited, and it's Swim Tough: How I Swam My Way Out of a Bottle, and it is just getting the final scoring done for the music, and I will be going to various movie festivals around the world, actually, and we'll be showing the movie and talking about the movie and talking about my addiction and talking about my recovery. And it's really an unbelievable opportunity for me to have this as a way to lay the groundwork to talk about what I've gone through and to potentially help others. And for the book, my sister and I have started kind of drafting up some ideas. My sister's a writer.
Okay.
I am not a writer, and she's also in recovery, and that has been very rewarding to watch how far she's come. And we hope to get out there and capture some of my experiences and her experiences and write about them.
Awesome. Awesome. Where can people find you, or how can they learn more about you?
Yeah, so my Instagram is at ben.tuff, Tuff, and my website is swimtough.com, and that just went live a couple days ago. So you'll be able to stay apprised as to where I am, kind of what film festivals I'll be going to once that's determined, how to watch the movie. You can watch the trailer off of there. And yeah.
That's awesome. Now, do you know where's the movie? Where can people watch the movie? Do you have that information yet?
No, so that'll be determined a little bit later. It basically will go out to bid to all the streaming giants out there, and hopefully one of them will pick it up, and then it'll be on a Netflix or a Hulu or an Amazon or something like that.
Awesome. Awesome. Ben, thank you so much for your time today. I appreciate you. I really enjoyed getting to learn more about you and getting to know you. And thanks everybody else for watching.
Thank you.
If you found this video to be of value, be sure to like it, subscribe to our channel if you want to see more videos, leave a comment if you have a question, if you've got something to say. Camelback Recovery provides treatment services for people struggling with mental health, mental illness, addiction, alcoholism. So if you or someone you know is struggling, be sure to reach out to us. You can go to our website, camelbackrecovery.com, or our information is in the comments section below. And we provide everything from detox, inpatient, outpatient treatment, sober living, recovery coaching, sober companion services. So either we'll be able to help you or we'll be able to refer you to people or treatment centers that might be a better fit. So I will see you in the next video.